Hello. This is Joy of 3D. A lot of people have been asking me about this animation I made, and they wanted a tutorial, or I guess like an overview of my process for it. So I thought I would go through that. Please forgive me for the ums and ahs and pauses, if there's any. I'm not really too good at recording myself or making tutorials. So I'll do my best, but please bear with me. These are the frames of the animation. You know, on a frame as crazy as this, the little shapes I made just come in for a frame, maybe two, and then they go back. I actually have a new file prepared. I figured I'd just make a whole new animation. And to give myself a little bit of a challenge, I'm gonna try and do a Venom pose. I'm not gonna do the teeth or anything of the teeth. We'll figure out what to do with that later. But I thought the pose was really interesting, and it's different than what I would have normally done. And it has some beautiful smears. So yeah. Let me just do an overview of my animation process. In general, I'll break these up into chapters throughout the video, so you can sort of skip through them or go back and forth. But I'm just gonna list them all out right now. The first thing I do is set up my render settings, as well as my lighting and my camera settings that I like. Then I just want to talk about my 3D animation philosophy when it comes to stylized 3D work. I try to keep that in the forefront of my mind, lay out sort of a vision or a plan as well, so it's good to talk about it before I start. Then the actual first thing I'll do is lay down poses on 4s or higher. I do this in spline. I rarely ever work in stepped, and I don't touch the graph editor unless I want to at the end to sort of change up the timing or smooth things out, but pretty much I do keyframes only. Then I like to adjust the basic timing. So once I have my poses down, I try to make the timing a bit tighter. Then I'll add some snappiness as well as some nice settling and anticipation. After that, I'll do the hands and any other small details. Next, I'll stretch the bones and get really weird with it, so I can really push the gestures and the movement, and then I do smears and any other 2D effects, and I make sure I get really weird with it if I want to, and if I can. And that's it. Then I profit all day, baby. So let's start with the first thing, and that's going to be the render, lighting, and camera settings that I like. I briefly want to touch upon the philosophy for this animation project. When I do 3D animation, especially stylized 3D animation, I really want to get a hand-drawn look, and so I try to approach it as one would if they were drawing it frame by frame. The sort of downfall of 3D animation is that the computer calculates all your in-betweens for you. This is really convenient. A lot of the times it's very helpful and I like it, but you lose a lot of the magic when the computer does all the math for you. So I'm trying to approach this as if I'm drawing it by hand, frame by frame. If there's a certain look I want to achieve, or if there's an action that I want or an effect that I want, I will brute force it frame by frame if I have to. I find that is a really good way to get an organic 2D animation look in your 3D animations. Additionally, I talked about getting weird when it comes to the smears and the stretching of the bones. This too is for the same reason of making it look 2D and more cartoony. The more that you can subtly break the form, the better. The more it'll look not 3D. And I know it's kind of weird, you know, to approach 3D animation solely with the mindset of making it look 2D. But that's just what I love and the effect that I like to produce. And honestly, I can't draw as good as I can do 3D. So this is the medium where I can best express myself. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is lay down poses on 4s or higher. Again, I'm starting in Spline, not using the graph editor, just doing keyframes. The sort of key here is just to put down my poses. The big poses that I want to represent in the animation. And I have them here behind me, or behind Spider-Man, I guess, not me. I'm going to work with the arms in FK and the legs in IK. The reason is because the legs aren't really going to move from the ground much. I don't know if they move at all. The arms we're going to keep in FK because they're going to be making these big circular kind of motions a lot of the times. Maybe right here we'll switch them to IK because it's this more straightforward punch motion. There's a really great video on the philosophy of that as well, which I can link to in the description if you're wondering about what the difference is between IK and FK and when you should use them and when you shouldn't. So yeah, I'm just gonna get my poses blocked off. The reason I like to do it on 4s to start is you have a lot more room to work with when it comes to retiming. And the overall guiding principle of this workflow is hierarchy. I'm going to get my poses in first, then do the timing, then change the, then do the finer details and polish and stuff. That way, if I need to change anything, I'm always going back one level on the hierarchy, and I don't have to rehaul every single thing. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and restart your entire file if you need to. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes that's part of learning. Some of the best things I made after failing miserably and starting from scratch. Okay, so now we have our basic poses. But of course the timing is a little messed up. Why is that? Well, we need a bigger wind up here. We need sort of to hold this pose so that the punch sort of settles in, and then the smears are going to happen way faster than everything else. So now I'm just going to adjust everything to sort of have that timing. That's why I did it on 4s, because now I have a lot of room to work with. Just easier. And I want to try and keep it on even numbers if I can. It's just a little cleaner. If you need to stay on a frame for a little bit, you can just duplicate it as if it were in stepped. So now he'll stay on that for a couple frames. Yeah. Okay, I have my basic timing down. Might be some adjustments later, but as you can see, this is sort of the... it has a nice beat to it. And hey, it loops. That's pretty cool. So now the next step is to clean up these beats a bit by adding some snaps, settles, and anticipation, just so that each pose sort of flows into each other a lot more nicely. The way I like to think about this is like a tennis player. When a tennis player hits the ball, they do like a long sort of arcing motion with their hand, which is a bit slower at first, maybe, and then they really pull the trigger and it snaps shut, and then they follow through. So they do that long arcing motion, the trigger pull, and then the follow through, and it sort of makes this figure 8 kind of feeling, you know? And as it gets closer to the center or the point of the figure 8, the intersection, it speeds up. So if you think about it that way, you'll sort of have a good sense of where to add these and where to take them away. But essentially it's all about shortening the distance and elongating the distance between two sections. So for instance, I want this hand to sort of, I want the forearm to sort of follow the bicep on its way down from point A to point B. So I'm going to give it a little more time with its mother, point A. Its mother's going to have a little bit more custody. And look at that, a little less time with the father, point B, but it gets there in the end. Same timing, because we took care of the timing, but a little bit more of an arcing motion, spends a little bit more time up here at its mother's house, point A, and a little less time at point B. But that's okay, because now dad's going to get some more down here. And we just want to follow that motion through right here. Equal custody rights. Actually, I think he'll spend more time at his dad's house here. I don't like this hand turn transition from here to there. It's kind of ugly. And I will sort of do this body part by body part. Hello again, this is Joy of 3D. I'm recording this at a different time. I'm not doing this all in one shot. So I'm back. I'm done with the, let me see, where was that actually? I am done with the third step, which is making it snappy and adding the settles and adding the anticipation. So this is where we're currently at. I just want to show you something as well. It's not going to be a big deal for me because I'm not going to go too crazy with this, but I just wanted to show you why it matters to always check your work in a 3D space. So you can see he's facing this way, and now he's looking over there. So technically, I done messed up, but can't really notice it too bad in the camera view, so it's okay. For the purposes of this animation, I'm not really gonna spend time fixing it. Yeah. So the next part, I believe, is the hands, right? I do the hands ones? Yeah, I do the hands and other smaller details. In this case, there's no other smaller details, unless you want to count the eyes, but I'm not gonna. So what I like to do, and what's already done in this rig for me, is hands are on their own layer. So now that everything's done, I could just focus on the hands on their own layer. And all we're gonna do is, it's pretty much the same. You just sort of lay out the poses that you want for your hands. So in this case, we want him to do the web shooting pose. So yeah, this part's pretty boring. There's not really much to say. I'm just going to be putting the hands in poses that I enjoy. I want his fingers to be curling a lot and really weird and like almost like spider limbs. And we can just move these up a couple. So now, see that? So now the finger actually wraps up before the rest of the finger. Like the pointer finger wraps up before the rest. Actually, I might want to dial that back a bit. Now I can deselect. So now the hands are done. Here's where we're at. And now it's time to stretch the bone. So this is sort of like smearing before doing smearing. Get back to the fingers in a second. I don't know how to explain this. See, all we want to do is just stretch it out when there's a big change in motion, because what these smears essentially are doing is they're imitating motion blur in the absence of true motion blur. So we're trying to imitate like a cartoon kind of motion blur. So when there's a big jump from like, he's going from this pose to this pose really quick. So we need this big hefty motion blur. So we're just sort of starting to do the beginning of that. So his hand is going from this position. I'm sorry. He's going from this position to this position in one frame. So that's going to have a huge smear later on. We'll get to that. Yeah, so I'm just going to be stretching some bones. Okay, let's do his head, because we see his head makes this big jump there. So maybe I like to scale it on one axis a moment, and then I'll scale it on the, I'll hit shift, scale it on that axis again. And this is sort of trial and error. You can see that already kind of works. It's just one frame where his head is really stretched out. And honestly, I think we could push it further. Yeah, look at that. And you always sort of want it to follow the arc of like where his head is at point A and point B. So maybe we might want to tilt this down a bit more. It's just one frame, but you can already see how it adds a lot of personality to that movement. Add another one. Maybe here. And you sort of just want to keep watching it back, and you know, in this case I think this is too overpowering, it's too big, so we might want to like thin it out. And I think it's actually too long. I think this one should be that distracting. And you know what, honestly, his head's a clunky object, so maybe we can just push it aside more. His head's not on his body there, which I like. Okay, let's look at this hand. Stretch it like this. So that for that frame, it's sort of doing that. I might do it for this frame a little bit too. See that? And so that has sort of like a whippiness to it. Now let's really get weird. So from here to here, maybe we can amplify him a bit. Again, just doing this based on intuition. You can always go back and delete changes you made to the tweak bones.
My pain is still far greater than yours!
Look at that, I love breaking the form like that. Let's see how that looks. Oh, look at that settling. Like really, it's like a guitar string. His leg there. We'll do the same for this, I think. This is the best part of animating. Hey. Okay. I'm walking here. And now we just need to add the main smears. I'm just gonna create a UV sphere. Change the value to something really small, 8 by 8. Go into shading mode. There we go. And on our first keyframe, we'll put them down at the bottom. They're not going to be there at the end either. So now no matter, where we put them, we can always get them out of frame. Just kind of rambling. This part's really fun. This part's easy and really fun. So same thing as the smears with stretching the bones. We're just going to really push that. So right here there's a big push. So we're going to take this. We want these to be out in front more for sure. And we're just gonna stretch it on one axis. It doesn't really matter. We could put that like there, let's say. Make sure you duplicate your keyframes down here, right? Because we only want this to appear there for one frame. We want it there for another frame, so we'll take it. Mess with it again. If you don't feel like scaling it down every time, feel free to duplicate a frame like this, then just work from it. That way it's almost like you're working in steps. So you see it sort of creates that flipping motion. We can have this closer to the hand as well. And I know that on its own it doesn't look super impressive, but it's when you start adding a lot of them that it sort of gets better. You can also misshape them a bit later too, with shape keys if you want. And we can also duplicate it. In this case, we can sort of make that like stuttering trippy effect. So if you want to create this sort of curvature of it that way as well. So, and we don't even have to change. Now we have that motion to it. You see that? That's all we're doing is trailing. We are trailing things. Now let's look at the head briefly. The head is a clunkier object. I know I'm stretching it really big like this here. But for something like the head, which is so clunky, we want to do... And this needs to be... I want to do multiples instead of just a smear trail. So we'll sort of roughly match the place of where his head is. Just a bit smaller. And then actually just copy this on that frame. So we'll move it up a frame. Maybe 2 frames. That doesn't work. We need to do. So that's the sort of basic effect we're trying to create. It's this one in the middle that's sort of not working. Need to maybe stretch it out a bit more. So you see, in this case, our smear is completely detached from the person for the entirety of the smear, and this is because his head is a more clunky object, I guess. That's the only way I can really explain. It's more like a big fat mass, like moving through the space. So if it were attached, it would give the impression that his whole face is stretching, but because it's detached, it sort of just exemplifies that his clunky head is moving through at a speed that the camera can't track. The reason we put the full smear on the finger is because the finger is more like a stringy object. Have that. And then honestly, we could just duplicate these and continue working with just this object. And we always sort of want it to fall into itself, to morph a drop of water going into the rest of the glass. We want it to sort of fall back into itself. And we want to watch it to make sure it's following that straight line that we want it to. But the more smears you add, the more you can also hide little mistakes like that. Okay, so now we're done. And you can see for these frames where there are smears, it looks pretty hideous from other 3D angles, but the whole point of the the whole point of the shot is to just make it look good in the camera view. That's how we get that 2D effect when we're sort of locked off, the image is flattened, stuff. Yeah, this looks dope. I think I'll play with the compositing a bit, and not really much to that. I just sort of do what I think looks good. So yeah, that concludes this tutorial. I hope that helps, and I'll put the finished product at the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, and please pick up the rig from Sebs. Give him some love. Yeah. Bye-bye.